It was just another slow Tuesday afternoon at the small town diner where Emily worked the late shift. The clink of silverware and hum of conversation were as ordinary as any other day, until the door creaked open and an elderly man stepped in, trembling, with bruises on his face and torn clothes. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. The room fell quiet for a moment, and while most customers averted their eyes, Emily felt something shift in her chest. She walked over with a warm smile, even though she only had $13 left to her name, just enough to get through the week. Without thinking twice, Emily sat him down and offered him a hot meal. She didn't ask questions or make him feel small. It didn't matter to her who he was or what had happened, just that he needed help. She paid for his meal out of her own pocket, the last of her tips tucked carefully into the register. All she knew was that he'd been robbed, left with nothing but the clothes on his back, and the world had turned its back on him, except her. What Emily didn't know was that the man she was serving wasn't just some down-on-his-luck stranger. His name was William Hartley, and behind the wrinkled face and worn-out coat was a billionaire businessman who had vanished from the public eye years ago after a personal tragedy. Most assumed he had disappeared forever. But today, he walked into that diner not looking for food, but for something far more valuable. And in a world where kindness feels rare, Emily's simple act of compassion would ripple into something much greater than she ever imagined. As she cleaned up his table and watched him slowly walk out the door, she had no idea that her life was about to change forever. What she saw as a moment of decency, he saw as a lifeline. And while Emily returned to folding napkins and pouring coffee, the man she helped was making a quiet decision that would shake her world to its core. But what happens when a humble waitress unknowingly touches the heart of a man with the power to rewrite her future? And what will she do when she finds out just who he really is? Keep watching, because this story is only just beginning. Emily had always been the kind of person who gave more than she had. She wasn't rich, far from it. She worked double shifts just to cover rent, and had been skipping lunch herself to save a little extra. Still, she didn't hesitate when she saw someone in need. Maybe it was how she was raised, or maybe it was just who she was. But that day, giving up her last $13 felt like the right thing to do. What she didn't realize was that her small act of kindness had been quietly witnessed by someone who hadn't felt hope in a very long time. William Hartley sat in his car outside the diner for nearly an hour after leaving. The food she'd given him warmed more than his stomach. It stirred something deep inside him. Once one of the most powerful men in the city, William had stepped away from the spotlight after losing his wife and only son in a tragic accident. He walked away from his empire, from billions, unable to stomach the life he once lived. Over the years, he kept moving, always trying to escape the weight of his past. But kindness has a strange way of cutting through grief. That day at the diner, he wasn't dressed in his usual tailored suit or polished shoes. He had chosen to walk the streets dressed in worn clothes, looking for something real, something he hadn't felt in years. And in Emily, he found it. No judgment, no expectations, just simple human compassion. Back inside the diner, Emily was dealing with her own battles. Her landlord had left a final warning taped to her apartment door that morning. Her car had broken down again, and the bill for her mother's medication was due next week. She didn't tell anyone about the $13. She just smiled and kept pouring coffee for strangers who would never know what she gave up that day. But William knew. And that night, he opened a weathered notebook where he kept the names of the few people in his life who had shown him kindness when he had nothing to offer. Emily's name was added to the list, written in careful, shaky handwriting. He hadn't made up his mind yet on what he would do, but he knew one thing. He couldn't just walk away. Because sometimes the richest moments in life come from those who have the least to give. And Emily had just set something in motion that not even she could see coming. The next few days passed quietly, but Emily couldn't shake the image of the old man from her mind. Something about him lingered. The sadness in his eyes, the way he held his hands like they carried more weight than they should. She hoped he was okay, wherever he ended up. What she didn't know was that William hadn't gone far. In fact, he'd rented a small apartment just a few blocks away and had started spending his mornings watching the diner from across the street, hidden behind a newspaper and a plain cap. He wasn't spying, exactly. He just wasn't ready to show himself, not yet. Emily's problems were beginning to pile up. The diner had cut back her hours, claiming business was slow. Her bank account was almost empty, and she was falling behind on bills. Every night, she sat on her worn-out couch, wondering how she'd stretch her next paycheck. She hadn't told anyone, not her coworkers, not her best friend, not even her mom. She was always the strong one, the one who didn't ask for help. But even strong people have breaking points. Meanwhile, at a downtown law office, one of William's former business partners, a sharp and calculating man named Victor Lang, was growing suspicious. He'd recently learned that William had been spotted in the city, looking disheveled and alone. Victor didn't like loose ends, especially ones tied to fortunes that hadn't been fully claimed. He started digging into William's whereabouts, his old properties, even pulling surveillance footage from nearby businesses. He wanted answers, and more importantly, he wanted control over whatever was left of William's empire. Back at the diner, Emily's manager, Carla, had noticed her distracted mood and didn't hide her disapproval. Carla didn't like charity, and when she found out Emily had paid for someone else's meal out of her own pocket, she gave her a warning. "This isn't a soup kitchen," she said, her voice cold. Emily nodded, but inside, her heart sank. The world seemed to punish kindness more than it rewarded it. All the while, William kept watching, silently collecting pieces of Emily's story. He saw her walk home in the rain without an umbrella, carry groceries she clearly couldn't afford, and still show up every day with a tired smile for the customers. He knew she was struggling, but what he didn't know yet was how to help, without making her feel like another charity case. Because for once, he didn't just want to repay a debt. He wanted to do it right, and time was running out. Rain poured hard the following evening, beating against the diner's windows as Emily wiped down the counters in silence. The place was nearly empty, just a couple of regulars sipping coffee and the buzz of the old neon sign flickering outside. Her phone buzzed again, another notice from the power company. She ignored it, shoved it into her apron, and kept cleaning. But her mind was spinning. The pressure of everything she was carrying, bills, her mom's health, her job hanging by a thread, it was getting too heavy. And still, no word from the old man she couldn't forget. Across the street, William sat in his car, watching the diner glow dimly through the rain-streaked windshield. He had finally made up his mind. Tomorrow, he would reveal who he was and change Emily's life. He had drawn up the documents, everything she needed to pay off her debts, secure a new home, and build the life she deserved. But just as he was about to drive off, he noticed a black SUV slowly pulling up near the diner. He recognized the plates instantly. Victor Lang had found him. Victor stepped out of the vehicle with a slick smile and two sharply dressed men behind him. William sank down in his seat, heart pounding. He knew Victor wasn't just there to say hello. The man had always been ruthless when money was involved, and if he knew William was planning to give away a large part of his wealth, especially to someone outside the company, he'd do anything to stop it. William fumbled for his phone. but his hands were shaking too much to text. Inside, Emily felt a strange chill as the door opened and the suited men walked in. Victor gave her a tight, polite smile and asked to speak with the manager. Emily pointed toward the back, but couldn't ignore the way he glanced at her, like he already knew something. Her instincts told her something was off, but she brushed it aside. She didn't have time for strange thoughts. She needed to finish her shift. Outside, William knew this was his last chance. If Victor got to Emily first, if he found a way to scare her, buy her off, or dig into her life, it could all fall apart. Everything was on the line now. And as the rain kept falling, and the lights inside the diner dimmed, one question hung in the air. Would William make it in time? The door chimed again as another figure stepped into the diner, drenched, breathing hard, and visibly tense. It was William. Emily blinked, surprised. She hadn't seen him in days, and barely recognized him now that he was clean-shaven and wearing a worn blazer. His eyes locked onto hers for a split second before flicking toward the back, where Victor had disappeared with the manager. Emily's heart skipped. Something about the way William moved, deliberate, urgent, sent a jolt of unease through her. She stepped forward, but before she could say a word, William shook his head slightly, silently asking her to wait. He walked past her and stood near the counter, close enough to hear everything happening behind that swinging door. What none of them knew was that Victor wasn't just there to find William. He had already uncovered who Emily was. In the back office, he held a folder filled with printed documents, Emily's debt records, eviction notices, her mother's unpaid medical bills. He was laying it all out in front of Carla, spinning a story about how Emily had been using the diner to manipulate wealthy customers, painting her as someone running a scheme for sympathy and handouts. "You might want to keep a closer eye on her," Victor said smoothly, "especially with someone like Hartley hanging around." Back out front, Emily watched William's face pale as he heard his name. She felt a chill go down her spine. None of this made sense. Why was the strange businessman from earlier talking about her like she was part of some plan? And how did he even know her name? William couldn't wait anymore. He turned to Emily, his voice low but firm. "You need to leave with me. Now, before he ruins everything." Emily froze. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "What's going on?" But before William could answer, Carla burst from the back, her expression stiff. "Emily, can I talk to you for a minute?" she said, eyes darting between her and William. Tension hung heavy. Emily looked at the man who had once seemed lost and broken, and now seemed like someone who knew far more than he was letting on. The whispers, the glances, the secrets, it was all building towards something bigger than she'd imagined. And now, caught between two powerful men and a truth she didn't understand, Emily had no idea who to trust or what was coming next. Emily followed Carla to the back office, heart pounding. William stayed by the counter, watching through the glass, unsure if he'd arrived too late. Inside, Victor stood beside the desk, arms crossed, that smug smile still plastered on his face. Carla looked at Emily, holding the folder. "Emily," she said carefully, "this man says you've been involved in some questionable things. That you're connected to Mr. Hartley and I don't even know who Mr. Hartley is." Emily cut in, her voice cracking with frustration. "I gave a man a meal because he looked like he needed it. That's it. That's all I did." Before Carla could speak, William pushed open the door and stepped inside. "That's not all she did," he said firmly. "She gave her last dollars to help someone with nothing. She didn't know who I was. She just cared." Victor scoffed. "And now you want to give her half your fortune. Are you out of your mind?" William turned to him, his eyes calm but sharp. You tried to destroy people like her your whole life, Victor. But she reminded me what kindness looks like. I walked away from billions because I couldn't trust anyone. Then a waitress, with nothing to gain, treated me like a human being. That's the kind of person I want to invest in." Carla blinked, stunned. "Wait, asterisk your asterisk, William Hartley." William nodded. "And I've already transferred the money. Emily now has enough to pay off her debts, care for her mother, and never have to work a double shift again unless she wants to." Emily stood frozen. "Why would you do this for me?" William smiled softly. "Because he reminded me that money means nothing without purpose." Victor's face twisted in anger. "You'll regret this, William. She's playing you. They all do." But before he could storm out, another voice entered the room, unexpected and firm. It was Carla. "You're not welcome here. And if you're spreading lies about my staff, I'll call the police." Victor left without another word. Emily turned back to William, still shaken. "So what now?" William looked out the window, then back at her. "Now you choose what to do with a second chance." But just as the weight of everything began to settle, Emily's phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. It simply read, "Asterisk, he's not the only one watching you, asterisk." And just like that, peace was interrupted once more. Emily stared at the message, her heart thudding in her chest. For a moment, it felt like the ground had shifted again, just when things had started to settle. William stepped closer, noticing the concern on her face. "What is it?" he asked quietly. She showed him the screen, and his jaw tightened. He took the phone gently and made a call without hesitation. "I'll have it traced. Don't worry." "You're safe now," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes scanned the room like someone used to watching his back. Emily believed him, not just because of his wealth or his past, but because she could see that he truly meant it. In the days that followed, things moved quickly. William had his legal team clear Emily's debts within the week. He quietly arranged for her mother to receive full medical care at one of the best facilities in the state. He didn't make grand gestures or draw attention. Instead, he let Emily take the lead, asking her how asterisk she asterisk wanted to use the money, what asterisk she asterisk wanted to build. It was the first time in her life anyone had given her the power to choose. The mystery text was eventually traced to a disgruntled former associate of Victor Lang, someone trying to stir up trouble after being cut out of a deal. With William's help, legal action was taken, and the matter was quietly closed. But the message had served as a reminder. Even when good things happen, there are always shadows that linger. Still, Emily didn't let it shake her. She used part of the money to buy a small home for her and her mother. She reopened a rundown cafe near the edge of town and turned it into a warm, welcoming place for anyone who needed a hot meal or a kind word. She hired people who were down on their luck, people who reminded her of who she used to be. She called it asterisk second chances asterisk. William visited often, but never tried to control her decisions. He had found peace not in giving money, but in seeing someone build something good with it. And Emily? She finally understood that the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that sometimes when you give your last $13, the world gives back more than you ever imagined.